Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek. This is the fifth in a series of videos that I'm doing called The Secrets of Westeros, where we are looking at some of the most mysterious places and peoples in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire. Today, we are looking at one of, I think, the most fascinating places, certainly in Essos, probably in the whole world. And I have got one of the most insightful, clever, and wonderful commentators to help me out here. Gray, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here talking about my favorite place in Essos. So thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. For those who don't know, Gray has got a channel, This Gray Area. I will put a link down in the description, and I'm sure at the end of this, then she will be able to tell us everywhere on the internet that we can find her. So let's start out. We're looking at the House of the Undying, which is a place that appears only once in the books and on the show, but it is kept a place in our imagination. So you said, we'll get into the details in a bit, but you said, Gray, that this is your favorite place. Just give us a flavor of why. What is it about this place that you like so much?
It's super duper mysterious. So I like the magic in A Song of Ice and Fire, and this place is magical. And I just like the way that the building, like everything around it is magical. So you have these weird trees that are black barked and blue leaved, and then you have this building that's shaped like a snake, and every door, like the way you get in and out, you got to take all the doors to the right. You got to go up, never down, but somehow you still get out the same way that you came. Like, it's weird. It's like a a puzzle fun house at a not so fun circus. I love it.
Yeah, it is, and the way it's introduced as well. You get Pierre Pre, who's there. He's this mysterious character. Sort of, he's here. He appears over there. The person who Daenerys has sort of presenting her with this drink that we'll talk about in a moment is a dwarf. There's people who are in blue. It's supposed to be different and other and stand out in our minds. Yeah. But let's place this first of all, before we get into it. And yes, we are going to get into that vision that Daenerys had, and we've got lots of ideas about what that might mean. But let's place this is in Karth. You said a little bit about the sort of the layout. Do you just want to expand on that a little bit? If you come towards it, what do you see?
So it's in Karth, the most magnificent city in the world. People, when Daenerys first sees it, she's like, what is this? Like, that she's thinking like it's going to be this splendid palace, like the best place in Karth, and it's not. It's the Palace of Dust.
Just by way of sort of a background, this is the magicians of the place, but it used to be mighty. It used to be incredibly powerful, but over time, this has sort of descended into this slightly decrepit place. There are tiles falling off of the roof. It's called the Palace of Dust because it's so few people go there. So, but as you approach, what you find is that you go through this grove of trees. Now, these trees are they have got blue leaves and they have got black bark. Now, this seems to be, and in order to experience the magic in some way, to open your mind in some way, you have to drink this kind of sap, or the drink that comes from the leaves of this tree, which feels a little bit like a sort of an opposite. I know you've got some thoughts on this, sort of like an opposite to the Weirwood network, where they're red leaves and white bark, and Bran has to kind of like drink some sort of strange sap drink, which allows him access to the magic. So there seems to be some connection going on there. What's your view on what actually is going on?
So there's definitely a connection between the two. So like from me being the reader and just like analyzing what George wrote, I think that he made them similar so we could draw some conclusions towards the visions that are actually in here. So Bran sees everything in his visions in a pattern. He drinks the weirwood paste, and everything is patterned by time. Everything's a puzzle, but there's like a pattern to it. And then Daenerys, to me, is the same. And so you have these. I don't know if he's specifically like leaving this clue for us, like, look, guys, these are the same because these patterns work the same, or is there something more going on? And my friend Amanda, Crowfood's daughter, she has a really good theory that the black bark trees were poisoned, and now they were weirwoods that were poisoned. And I think that she has a video on that on her channel. You can watch it. It's really good.
Yeah, and so Amanda has been on one of these ones already. We were talking about old Valyria, so I would highly recommend you go and check that out. My view is that yes, there clearly is at the very least a symbolic kind of like juxtaposition of these two different things. The idea that they might be poisoned weirwoods, I think, is fantastic. We don't see in Essos, we don't hear of any weirwood trees at all. And does that mean, because it seems that the weirwood trees, if they are just one huge organism, maybe they can't travel across or get across the narrow seas, so that they can't be in Westeros? Or perhaps when there was that ancient magic, the hammer of the waters that separated the two continents, perhaps that was what poisoned or broke the connection and left them as they are. But whatever it is, what we're left with is these two trees that are deliberately set, two sets of trees that are deliberately set up as sorts of opposites, but they are both very magical. And drinking their sap or whatever thing is made from them does seem to open up your mind to the magic in some way. And when people drink it, we have a description of when Bran drinks it, and we have a description of when Daenerys drinks it, the Shade of the Evening. It tastes the same. To start with, it tastes horrible, but then it reminds them of certain wonderful things and certain other things, and the descriptions are incredibly similar. So we are supposed to see a connection between the two. At the very least, it means that there's some kind of distorted version of the weirwoods going on here. Now, we will come back to what happens there in just one moment, but I want to take you off to Euron, because this Shade of the Evening drink, whatever it is, he has a barrel of it. Now, the long story, the long version of this story is that, or the short version of the long story is that after Daenerys destroys this, destroys the House of the Undying, the Warlocks obviously don't like her, they hate her, they go chasing after her on a boat, and they bring a barrel of their magic juice with them. Euron captures it, he gets it, and he glugs loads of it, and he sees huge dreams. Does this mean, do you think, that the visions that Euron starts getting, we should treat in the same way as the visions that Dany was getting after she was taken?
Yes. Yes and no. I don't know. I would say yes, because it's the Shade of the Evening, but no, because it's kind of like the mechanism that Daenerys is using is what constitutes like the pattern, and the mechanism of what Bran is looking for a tree, looking through a tree. So as the tree grows and shrinks, that's how he views time. But Daenerys is in a building where she has to follow a specific pattern not to lose her soul. Like she has to take the last door on the right.
Mm-hmm. The first door on the right, and always go up the stairs.
Right. She has to follow that pattern in order to leave that place with her soul. And they like try to trick her into not following that pattern. So those things, like the mechanisms that they use, are what makes me think that more so that it's a pattern. But I do also think that the Shade of the Evening and the Weirwood paste, I don't know. Like if you maybe maybe we should look at them. We should look at them and see if there's a pattern there.
Yeah, so Euron's visions don't seem to be so much in a pattern, and he gives it obviously to Aaron for him to be looking at stuff. But I think where I'm coming from is that the warning that Daenerys gets, she goes there for truth. She goes there to kind of like get a hint what she's going to do. This is a kind of a turning point when she's in Karth. She thought she knew what was happening when she was there being the Khaleesi. Drogo dies. Then she gets the dragons. It takes a long time to get across the Red Waste to Karth, and she's then in Karth not really sure what to do. Now, on the show, she ends up going to the House of the Undying because they capture her dragons. But in the books, she's going there for truth. She wants to understand stuff and all the rest of it. So the warning she gets is some of what you're going to see is the past, some of what you see is the future, some of it is futures that aren't going to happen. So it's like you can trust most of this, but don't trust all of it. So my kind of take is that we can take that to what Euron has been seeing and say, okay, so we can trust some of what he sees, but not all of what he sees. How does that, as a sort of a way of approaching it, strike you?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best. Yeah, that's probably the best explanation because I really hope that Uranus doesn't turn into a squid or a kraken and sit on the Iron Throne with a kraken head or whatever his vision exactly was. So I hope that he's seeing a day that never was. And not a morrow that's not made yet. I hope it's a day that never will be.
Yeah, and I hope so too. But he seems to be basing what he's doing on what he's seen. Because crazy is as crazy does. That's what Euron's all about. Okay, so we've got Daenerys, who's gone there. She's seeking for truth. She's been told, you will see truth. What happened, what will happen, but also a few little bits of lies. She gets given the drink, she takes the drink, then she goes in. Now, I suspect that the meat of what we're going to be talking about today are these visions. On the show, if you just watch the show, she had 2 or 3 different images. They're very different to what we've got in the books. In the books, she sees a whole series of over 20 different visions. Some of them, she looks into rooms and can see like scenes playing out. Some of them are just images charging at her. So it's and later on, she also gets a whole load of titles and words thrown at her, and it's very, very complicated. And as a fandom, A Song of Ice and Fire fandom has come out with a million different explanations for what might have been going on here. Why don't we sort of quickly go through what she sees, see whether we can agree what she actually sees, and then I know you've got a few thoughts on what that might mean as a whole, and I've got a few thoughts about what that might mean as a whole, and we'll try and see whether we can sort of like pull it all together. So,
do it.
Excellent. So she goes in. She's drunk the drink. She's ready. She's told first door on the right, always go up. She sort of goes through it, lots of different rooms, all the rest of it. And she passes by a few rooms on her way to actually getting to the Undying, who perhaps we can talk about in a moment because they're a completely different thing. She sees, I think, 5 rooms to start with. Now, the first room that she sees is a woman, a beautiful woman with like 4 sort of horrible dwarven things sort of scurrying over her and doing all manner of horrible things to her. Now, what's your take on what this might be?
I don't know what it is, but I can tell you. I can tell you. I don't. So the fandom has like this explanation that it's Westeros. The woman is Westeros, and the men crawling over her are the War Five Kings. Um, I don't think so, because a pattern. You're gonna hear me say pattern so many times because that's my whole jam.
I think that's fine, and I think actually probably I should have said, why don't you explain the pattern for the first five? What you think there's a pattern for these first five, don't you?
Yeah. So Bran. So I get this from Bran. So in A Dance with Dragons, Bran sees his visions, and they start from closest to the present to the past. And as Daenerys is seeing these, she's walking backwards in time. So she sees, hold on, let me get it. She sees five doors.
Yeah, so we've got five. We'll leave the sort of the Undying trying to do tricksy things. I'll do high level here. What we've got the first one. We've got a beautiful naked woman being ravished by four little men with kind of ratish faces. That's the first thing. Then we get like this feast of corpses, all holding spoons and food, and a wolf's head on a dead man's body. Then we get a house with the red door. Then we get a throne room with dragon skulls on the wall, and somebody talking about being Lord of the Ashes, King of the Ashes. Then finally we get a silver-haired man who goes in quite a long discussion here about his son, who he's going to name Aegon. So those are the five things that she kind of walks past, and you think that they're in time order. Is this right?
Right. So we start, like, if we start from the last door she sees, which is Aegon. So she sees the birth of Aegon. Do you believe that's the birth of Aegon?
Yeah. So okay. Well, why don't we do this the other way around then, and make sure. So this first one we get a room. We've got a silver-haired person who she thinks initially looks like Viserys, but then decides isn't. And he's got there's another woman there, and he's got a baby, and he says this child is Aegon, the prince that was promised, and he's got a song, the song of ice and fire. Now, I think this is Rhaegar and Elia and their firstborn son, who is Aegon.
I agree.
Awesome. So far, we're all in full agreement. So going back one, why don't you? This is the throne room. Why don't you explain this one?
Okay, so going back one is the Mad King, about to burn King's Landing. He's saying, burn them all. Let him be king over charred bones and cooked meat. We know that's what the Mad King says about Robert Baratheon before Jaime kills him. So, and then going back again, or is Daenerys in Bravo. Daenerys, we don't have to go into that. Daenerys at the house with the red door, wherever the house with the red door is.
Well, she thinks it is the house with the red door, the house in Bravos. So I'm feeling on solid ground that it's in Bravos.
Same. So the house with the red door, which is her childhood, and then Robb Stark, at the red wedding.
So the image, it seems like an image of the red wedding with, slightly kind of like magicalized and all the rest of it. So it's probably not a literal vision of it, but slaughtered corpses holding cups, spoons, and food with a dead man, a wolf's head. That all seems to be an Iron Throne. That all seems to be the red wedding.
Right. And then the woman. So we have it clearly. If you look at the first vision to the last one, it's clearly in order. Like Aegon, the birth of Aegon would have came before the Mad King, Burn Kings said to burn them all. And the burn them all, the speech would have come before Daenerys grew up, because her mom was still pregnant with her when that happened. And then the Red Wedding, or her growing up, would have come before the Red Wedding. And then we have the Red Wedding, and then this woman. So I think like the idea that this woman is showing us the War of Five Kings, is it correct? Because Robb, she sees the Red Wedding before it, so Robb would already be dead at the time, and then Balon's already dead. Is Renly's not dead yet?
He's in the about to die, I think.
Yeah.
Whether he actually is or not, I'm not 100% certain. But so the sort of the consensus view. I mean, I like this. I like this quite a lot, actually. This idea that this moves through time. The consensus view within the fandom often seems to be that this is, as you say, this is a kind of symbolic expression of Westeros. This beautiful woman that has got all these four men fighting over it. And because they're fighting over it, they're ruining it. They're doing bad things. It's not a good image. And yes, so we've got the War of the Five Kings. It's only four of them? Does this mean that that's because there are only four alive at that particular time? Well, possibly. But if we buy into this idea that actually this is the future, because the Red Wedding hasn't happened at this point either. So the Red Wedding's already in the future. And if we're going about this being a whole series of visions going back in time, this one must be the furthest forward. What might this mean? Is this a future moment in time? Are we still buying into this idea of it being Westeros with four kings, or what?
I think it might be Cersei. Now, hear me out.
Okay, right. Love it already. Go.
So every other vision that she's seen right there have been straightforward. They've been straightforward visions, nothing like symbolic. And so I feel like this is a straightforward vision too. And the woman that she's seeing is Cersei. And the dwarves that she's seeing crawling on her have to do with Euron. In the Forsaken, the damp hair sees, I didn't even want to try to pronounce his name. The damp hair sees Euron, and he has this woman beside him, this pale woman, which I believe is Cersei. Like before Game of Thrones went there with Euron and Cersei teaming up, I thought they would team up.
I'm absolutely with that. You don't need to worry about that bit. I'm there with you on that.
So he sees dwarves. Is it dwarves or fools capering for their amusement?
Yeah, I think fools capering. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have thought that was Cersei, and the dwarves, like Jaime says to Cersei, like, you're seeing Tyrion in every corner, or like in every shadow you're seeing Tyrion. And I think like the dwarfs may have something to do with Tyrion, like the way that she has lived her life in like this paranoia state that Tyrion's the Valonqar, Tyrion's going to kill me, he's going to slit my throat in my sleep, he's going to kill my children. And like this image is like the manifestation of like how Cersei's going to be because of this paranoia, and the part that Euron is going to play, I think, from the Forsaken, that where the damp hair sees a woman with Euron and fools capering.
Yeah. So the Forsaken is the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. So I really like this idea. So if we take this, then four of these visions I think are very clear. Four of them I don't think there's any debate about at all. One of them does work, it has to be said, for this is what Westeros looks like, with lots of people fighting over it and all the rest of it, other than why are there 4 rather than 5 if this is the War of the Five Kings. But if we do accept this idea that there's some kind of like timeline working through, we're going back in time through these visions, then yeah, this is something in the future. And why not Cersei? She is obsessed with characters who look a little bit like Tyrion. So, okay, let's move on. So that's just the introduction. So that's just the introduction. We then have Daenerys keeps on walking. She keeps on trying to find the first door on the right, keeps on trying to go upstairs. We have a couple of times when what looks like the Undying are trying to distract her away. One time, Pri seems to appear and say, "Come on, this way. You finished already? Wow." And then you get another time when you get these bunch of wise-looking wizards who all appear and say, "Hey, we're the Undying. Come in here." She moves past them. She sees through that, and she keeps going. And eventually she comes to this room where the actual Undying are. And the Undying are pretty horrific. So they are blue. And one thing we should say about the shade of the evening is that it turns your lips blue and your tongue blue when you drink it a lot. But it seems that these have been drinking it for so long that they themselves as a whole have been turned blue. In the middle, sort of, they're sat around a table, don't seem to really be breathing. There's debate about whether they're undying, but are they actually dead or not? It's not quite clear. And there's this huge blue, slow pumping heart in the middle of it all, which is like really kind of gruesome. I mean, what's your thought before we move on to what visions and things they say? What's your thought there? Are they undead? Are they unnaturally extended lives? What do you think's happening at that point?
They're like Bloodraven. They're okay. Like Bloodraven, like how Bran thinks of him like as a corpse. And it's the thought that because he's at this tree, that this root system is extending his life because he's lived beyond his mortal lifespan. And I think the Undying are the same, but like not with as much finesse, because the Undying have a parallel to the weirwood trees themselves. So there's a heart sitting on the table, right? Mm-hmm. And what do we call weirwood? What do we call the weirwood at castles? A heart tree.
It's a heart tree, yeah.
So, and then you have Bloodraven, who tells Bran like the season or a person's life is like the flicker of a moth's wing. And then Daenerys is told the same thing about the Undying ones by Pri, like our lives pass by to them as in the flutter of a moth's wing. It's like a little tiny difference. And when Bran is in the cave, the Weirwood cave north of the wall, he sees like the green seers like entombed in these roots. And he's like, I didn't even know if they were real, but their eyes followed me when I walked past. So I think that the Undying ones aren't necessarily dead, but they aren't necessarily alive either. Like they're trapped in that palace of dust and they probably can't get out. Like how the Weirwoods, the children of the forest, they go inside the trees when they die. Like if they aren't regular, like their souls go in the tree. So that that's why the children of the forest were beefing so much with the first men. Like you cut down our literal ancestors. So I think there's something like that.
Yeah.
And that's why they're so pissed at Daenerys.
and this makes huge amounts of sense because again, we're getting this kind of like almost opposite to what's going on with the weirwood trees, or a kind of corrupted version of it. So we see in Bloodraven's cave all of the, not just Bloodraven, but lots of the children of the forest hooked up to it, just about staying alive. Or are they alive? Are they not alive? It's an unnaturally extended life. And here we have what seems to be the same. And she's told that they're dead. and they immediately, as they sort of come back at her, saying, "We live, we live." It's not, they're not dead, but they have got this kind of unnaturally extended life. So then she comes to them, and we get to like the bit that everybody debates a lot, because we get a whole series of titles and a whole series of kind of like prophetic messages, and then this flurry of visions, one after the other. So why don't I just quickly read out the things that they say, so the sort of the prophetic words and all the rest of it, and then we'll go through what she sees and see whether we can kind of try and make sense of it. Okay. So she comes and she says, "I've come for the gift of truth," and says, those things I saw last time, before the stuff we've just been discussing, what do they mean? And they say, "The shape of shadows, morrows not yet made, drink from the cup of ice, drink from the cup of fire, mother of dragons, child of three." Three? She did not understand. "Three heads has the dragon," the ghost chorus yammered inside her skull, with never a lip moving, never a breath stirring the still blue air. "Mother of dragons, child of storm," the whispers became a swirling song. And then we get on to these three things that lots of people have been discussing lots. "Three fires you must light, one for life, one for death, and one to love. Three mounts you must ride, one to bed, one to dread, and one to love. Three treasons will you know, once for blood, once for gold, once for love." At which point she says, "I don't understand," and they say, "We'll help." So we then get a whole series of these visions. So why don't we go through these visions? First of all, we get three visions before the line, "Mother of dragons, daughter of death." And the first one is of Viserys. Now, are you and the second one, actually, well, I'll do all three of these ones, and then maybe you can react to all three. So we get Viserys screaming as the gold crown goes over his head. Then we get what's a tall lord with copper skin and silver gold hair, standing beneath the banner of a fiery stallion. Then we get rubies flying like drops of blood from the chest of a dying prince. Now, what's your take on these three?
And they give her the title, right? Daughter of Death, right?
Daughter of Death, yeah.
Okay. So Viserys is the rightful king to the Seven Kingdoms. Because of his death, Daenerys becomes the next in line, the queen of the Seven Kingdom. So I have this idea that all of them, they call her Daughter of Death because of these people dying, that they've shown her, you are who you are. So Rhaego is who I think the next one is. Like they're showing her what Rhaego would have been if he didn't die, like if he lived. And Rhaego, we know, was supposedly the stallion who mounts the world. Daenerys, I believe, is the stallion who mounts the world, or Drogon, one of them. So because Rhaego died, that title now is given to Daenerys. So Daenerys is born stallion who mounts the world, born the king, queen, the heir to the throne, or the last living Targaryen, whatever you want to call it, because Viserys died. And then we have Rhaegar. Rhaegar thought prince was promised for a long time, or Azor Ahai, or whatever. That's Daenerys. I totally feel like Daenerys is Azor Ahai, and she checks every box for it. And because Rhaegar died, it's I don't know. These three people had to die in order for her to be born into who she is.
Yeah, I think I would agree certainly on that last point completely. Is that she's the daughter of death. So who she is becoming and who she is shaped by death. And it's the death of Rhaegar, and it's the death of Viserys, who are two older brothers. That has left her who she is, and the death of Rhaego, her unborn child, also has shaped who she is. So she is the daughter of death. We can go into sort of like further layers to this, I suspect, into, as you say, you believe that there's a good chance that she's Azor Ahai reborn or whatever. The dragon the stallion that mounts the world is that's what the prophecy was going to be about. Rhaego, that was sort of stopped. That was what Miri Maz-Duur was doing, was to try and stop that from coming true. So that is one of these visions that we can say that's a vision of something that could have been. But all of those things added together make her a daughter of death. She is who she is because of death. So I think we're broadly agreed on that, which is a good start. Second bit we've got here is these three things leading up to Slayer of Lies. We've got glowing like sunset, a red sword in the hand of a blue-eyed king who cast no shadow. Then we got a cloth dragon swaying on poles, and then a smoking tower, a great stone beast taking wing, breathing shadow fire. So if we're saying that those first three were all describing what Daughter of Death means, these three things are all describing what Slayer of Lies means. So what do you think these three things are? That lies, presumably, that she must slay.
Stannis.
Yeah.
His sword being Lightbringer. I have this old pattern, and we'll get into it later. But basically, when she birthed dragons, when she woke dragons from stone, she slayed the lie that Stannis Baratheon was Azor Ahai, and his sword was really the flaming sword Lightbringer. The second, the Mummer's dragon. I've been having different thoughts about Aegon Phaegon lately, so I think it's supposed to. I think the Mummer's dragon is Varys is the Mummer, and his dragon is Phaegon.
It's Phaegon. Well, I'll jump in. I can see your and we all do this from time to time. We go out where we go, oh, maybe this, maybe that. So my current thinking is that Phaegon is a fake. He probably thinks he's Aegon the Sixth, but he is a Blackfire pretender. Yes, I agree completely. The Mummer is Varys, and the Mummer's dragon is therefore Phaegon. Now, I think, therefore, that if she's this Slayer of Lies, this is the second thing that she'll show to be untrue. Yes, the first one I would agree completely. We get Stannis is not Azor Ahai reborn. That's very clear. This idea of him with Lightbringer, and it's just Melisandre trying to make things fit what she wants them to fit. The second one, I think, is Phaegon. What do you make of the third one then, about the sort of the stone dragons or whatever?
What was the third one? Was it?
The third one was from a smoking tower, a great stone beast took wing, breathing shadow fire.
Yes. So I think that. So Game of Thrones season 7, we've seen like Viserion get reanimated into a dragon. So I don't think like we're gonna in the books have a reanimated White Walker dragon. I think we're just gonna have either a regular ice dragon or a shadow dragon from something that Melisandre does. That right now she's like trying to use King's blood to wake a shadow dragon, or to wake dragons from stone. So I think she's gonna do something shadowy that's gonna mess up the dragons. And I think the smoking towers could really be Eastwatch, because she sees towers in her visions, and she thinks it's Eastwatch. Like she tells Jon, like, I think it's Eastwatch, but I was at Eastwatch and the towers don't look like that. A lot of people, I think, have pointed to like it has to do with Euron doing something crazy in Old Town. But but I think that it might foreshadow something else like that, like a another type of dragon. I don't think it foreshadows Viserion, because she would know if it was one of her children.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think this is a thing that we haven't yet had, and so we can't definitively say what it is. I mean, but you could interpret it as being this is she's slaying the lie that Melisandre had about Stannis with them. He's going to bring stone dragons to life and all the rest of it. But that seems to be kind of duplicating what's already been there, so it's probably not that. I think I would go with this idea that this is a thing we've not yet seen, so something we need to look out for. And if I had to guess, it would be something that Euron does, some creation he has that he is trying to say, we know this seems to be where he's about, that he is a god. And again, this seems to be a thing that she would have to, a lie she would have to slay. Mm-hmm. The first lie is this idea that Stannis is Azor Ahai reborn. He's clearly not. The second is that Phagon is the true Targaryen heir. He's not. The third, I suspect, is Euron, but I don't think we've yet seen enough to know exactly what that is. But any which way, I think we're agreed on the fact that this is three things that she, by her very presence, not necessarily by things that she specifically does, but by her very presence and who she is, she will be disproving some lies as she goes along. So then we get the third bit, which leads up to this Bride of Fire. And three images again, her silver, which is her horse trotting through the grass to a stream. The second, a corpse stood at the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face. And then third, a blue flower grew from a chink in a wall of ice and filled the air with sweetness. I'll take this one first, and then if you tell me whether you agree with these ones. I think that this is, as it says, Bride of Fire. I think this is showing that she's going to marry 3 times. And the first time we already know about, Khal Drogo. Her silver was trotting through the grass to a darkling stream beneath a sea of stars. That's a description of what happened on her first wedding night. So that's pretty clear. The second one, a corpse stood at the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face, grey lips smiling sadly. We do know that she does, in the books, she marries a second time to Hisdar, who's this guy in Meereen, and he is almost certainly betraying her at this precise moment. So I have a feeling that she is going to take her revenge on him, and if I had to guess, she will then put him on the front of one of her ships as she sails across the sea to go to Westeros. So I think that's probably what that is. Third one, a blue flower growing from a chink in a wall of ice, filling the air with sweetness. Well, a wall of ice, we know about the wall. A blue flower, that's Lyanna Stark's favorite flower. This is all pointing to Jon, and filling the air with sweetness, she actually loves him. So that's my take. She's going to marry 3 times, and those are the 3. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I've went back and forth a couple times on the ship, the ship
The corpse
possibly being Victarion, because he wants to marry her, and he's over there he's going over there, and he's gonna try to like steal her from Euron, and like he's had like this magic like thing with his hand going on. So maybe it's Victarion, and maybe that's one of those things that isn't gonna happen. But I would love to see Hisdar nailed to the front of her ship.
Oh, I think we all would. He's so creepy, that man. It's just if we take it in the context of the fact these are 3 marriages, then I think the second one has to be him, is my view. I don't think that Victarion's going to marry. Well, we already know that she's married to Hisdar. Victarion is not going to get what he wants. He's not anywhere near clever enough to achieve his goals, in my view. So we've got those three sets of three. Then we've got what is sort of called a sort of a flurry of other ones, just to sort of round all of this off. Faster and faster the visions came, etc., etc. The very air had come alive, so they're kind of like flying around all over the place. These other visions, there seemed to be no particular structure to these. We get shadows whirled and dance inside a tent, boneless and terrible. My take is that's possibly Miri Mazdur in that tent when she was casting the magic, and there were shadows in there. Have you got something else on that one?
No, I agree. 100%.
Excellent. A little girl ran barefoot towards a big house with a red door. Again, seems to be the house with the red door and her past. I'm going to assume that, shout if you disagree with any of these, actually. I'm going to assume that you'll agree with that because that seems reasonably straightforward. Miri Mazdur shrieking in the flames, a dragon bursting from her brow seems a kind of like a kind of lyrical way of showing what happened with Miri Mazdur's death and the fact that dragons were born when she died. Behind a silver horse, the bloody corpse of a naked man bouncing and being dragged. That seems to be the wine seller who tried to poison her. He got attached to the back of a horse and dragged through the land. A white lion running through a grass taller than a man. Possibly a reference to sort of Lannisters, but I think a white lion. This is something that Khal Drogo hunted and caught a white lion for her. Beneath the mother of mountains, a line of naked crones creeping up from a great lake and shivering, kneeling, shivering before her. This, I think, is a vision of the future. We saw it on the show when she burns down where the home of the Dosh Khaleen and the entire Dothraki nation at Vaes Dothrak sort of bow down before her. I think that's this one. And then 10,000 slaves lifted bloodstained hands as she raced by on her silver, calling out, "Mother, mother, mother." That she even thinks when she comes to that point in her history when she's freeing the slaves over in Slavers Bay. At which point, then suddenly we realize that this is all a big distraction. The Undying are trying to grab her and kill her and bring her in. Drogon saves the day by burning them all down. But in terms of that last flurry of visions, are there any there that you would sort of disagree on my sort of basic understanding of what they're saying?
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Oh, awesome. We are on fire today. Okay, so we've got a basic understanding of what each of these visions are, I think, now. You've got a sort of a way of understanding how they all fit together. So why don't you just sort of run us through what that is?
Okay. So with each vision, so we have this fire for love, treason for blood, mount to bed. Look, they tell her 3 fires must you light. So she has the first one. And the first one's like the easiest one because most of it has already happened. So with each fire, well, she tells them that she doesn't understand. And she's like, show me. And then they show her these things and give her these titles. So with each fire for love, mount to bed, and treason for blood, she must slay a lie, become a daughter of death, and a bride of fire. Also, for the first one, we see visions. So we see Viserys, Stannis, and the bride gift from Drogo, which is her silver horse. So all of this fits together. So all of these things have to fit together in some kind of weird George R.R. Martin puzzle to work. So the treason for blood. A lot of people think that it's Miri Mazdur. It could be Miri Mazdur, but I think that it's Viserys because I don't think the treasons are necessarily treasons that are committed against her, but are more so treasons that she commits against other people. So it could be Viserys, which would go with the image. And then the mount to bed is the bride gift from Drogo, the image that she showed us, that the Undying ones showed us. The Bride of Fire is Drogo. And when she actually walks into the flames to birth the dragons, she thinks to herself, like, this is a wedding. Like, this is a wedding too. I'm getting married to fire. But the mount to bed is the silver, and the fire for love is Drogo's funeral pyre, which slays the lie that Stannis is Azor Ahai. So did you get it?
Yes. So it kind of you're mapping the fires to light, the mounts to ride, and the treasons you will know onto these the images and visions that we've got. And the kind of the twist you've got here in terms of the treasons is that these aren't treasons that she will experience to herself necessarily, but these are treasons that maybe she herself has done. So with Viserys, I think this is a fascinating way of looking at it. With Viserys, the treason there is that she's a Targaryen. Why on earth should she be standing by and allowing her own brother, who is the king, let's not forget this, in her eyes, he is the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, be killed? That is a treason.
Yeah. I have no problem with her killing or letting them kill Viserys, but I necessarily don't think it was a treason. But in A Dance with Dragons, when she's having that little berry quest, she has a vision of him, and she's like, you betrayed me, or you what did he say? She said you betrayed me. He's like, I didn't betray you, you betrayed me. So they have this thing going back. But also you could think about it as Viserys betrayed her, like when he sold her to Khal Drogo. But I think Viserys is the actual betrayal and not Miri Mazdor. Daenerys thinks it's Miri Mazdor.
Yeah. I think. Okay, so shall I put my thought here, which, as I say, I'm going to do a video on this in a couple of weeks' time, just to kind of set all this one out. But so I'm going to base this on this idea of the 3 fires you must light, 3 mounts you must ride, and 3 treasons you will know, because that there are sort of titles that she's been given, which fine, I think we understand that she has all of these titles. There's all these visions, and the visions kind of explain these ideas about her being all these different things, like the sort of the bride, or the daughter of death, and the slayer of lies, and things like that. So they kind of map onto there. My sort of extra bit here is this: what do these 3 things each mean? The first, so we have 3 fires you must light, and the first one, the fire for life, or I should probably say, fires that Daenerys lights. She lights a lot of fires, but most of them are with Drogon. Most of them, she gets her dragons to light fires. The amount of fires that she personally lights are incredibly limited. The first one for life is probably Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. She thinks it's to mark death, but it brings life. It brings 3 dragons to life. So that's a fire that she lights for life. One for death, I think that's the thing that we've seen on the show, not yet in the books, although there's kind of a hint of it in these visions here. That is the fire that she will burn down Vaes Dothrak, or at least the sort of the home of the Dosh Khaleen. That is a fire for death that she will personally do, not her dragons, which leaves a fire to light for love. I'll come back to that in just one moment. Then we've got 3 mounts you must ride. The first to bed, I think, particularly because we had the vision of the white horse, the silver horse, that seems to be the first one that she must ride. She was riding that for, it has to be said, most of book 1. The second to dread, this definitely seems to me to be Drogon, reminiscent of Balerion, the Black Dread. I can't see any way around that. There doesn't seem to be a particular vision associated with that, but I can't see anything else that she rides Drogon, people dread Drogon. It has to be Drogon. So we know the first two. The third one, to love. Again, let's leave that one to a side for a moment. And then we get three treasons you will know. For blood, I think I recognize what you're saying, but I think that is Miri Mazdur. I think that is because she personally she has a grudge based upon all the blood of the people in her village, and also it's a blood treason because she kills Dany's child and also her husband. So I think that is one for treason. She did betray her. She very clearly hinted, "I'm going to save your husband," and didn't. And she killed her child. So that, for me, is a clear betrayal. The second one, for gold, I think this is a bit harder, but there is another betrayal that she's experienced, which is Sajora. And the reason why he did seems to be more mercenary reasons, because he wanted stuff for his own benefit, whether it was purely gold or a pardon or whatever. That seems to work for me. And then we get this third one for love. So I think that the first two of each of these three, the fires for life and death, we know. The mounts for bed and dread, we know. The treasons for blood and gold, we know. What we don't have yet are the fire to light for love, the mount to ride to love, and then the treason you will know for love. And I think all three of these are bound up with Jon. That's my personal take on all of this. I think that these are things in the future that we haven't seen yet in the books. I suspect that the fire to light for love may well be connected with Lightbringer. Maybe he's going to plunge his sword in her and it's going to come out with fire, and that is the third fire she will light. Maybe a third mount she must ride will be Ghost. I don't know, but if she's going to be mounting a ride, sort of riding a mount, then maybe that's a different kind of thing that she could be riding. And then a treason, if he kills her, what Jon did on the show, that is a treason as well. So it's one associated with love. So that's where I'm at the moment. But as with all of these things, and I'd love your thoughts on that just one second, but as with all of these things, some of it is stuff that we know. Some of it is stuff in the future of the books that we can't yet fully know, obviously, because we've not got there. So we're just living on scraps and hints. But what do you think about that?
I agree. I think they all have to do with Jon Snow, because we have the Mount to Love, Fire to Love, Mount to Love, Fire to Love, Reason for Love, and then we have what lie will she slay because of this, and the image that goes with this said pattern is that smoking beast breathing shadow fire, or the beast from the smoking tower breathing shadow fire. And what was the other one? The chink in the wall of ice goes with this one. And is it what was the other? And Rhaegar goes with this one as well. So all of it seems to point to Jon. So I don't know what Daughter of Death, and it has Rhaegar's picture dying for the woman whispering a woman's name.
Dying, whispering Lyanna's name.
So
Rhaegar and Lyanna, as we all know, R+L equals J.
So is Daenerys gonna die whispering Jon's name? Oh my god.
She may well do. I mean, I think we have to prepare ourselves for George R.R. Martin absolutely hitting us over the head with some pretty heavy emotional stuff in these last couple of books.
True.
So yeah, she may.
I will say that the fire to light the fire, it like you were saying, it's not like the fire isn't going to be Daenerys burning King's Landing, because that would be Drogon burning King's Landing. So it needs to be something that Daenerys actually physically does herself. So I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree that it has to do with Jon. But like with these visions, the first set is very easy to figure out. The second set is kind of like, okay, yeah, because we have a little extra information from the show, so we can kind of see. But the third one, it's so far in the future that it's really hard to know for sure. But I think it could be the forging of Lightbringer. But then again, I don't think John's Azor High. I think Daenerys is Azor High. So
I think we will be debating who Azor High Reborn is well after the end of the books. I don't think it's going to be somebody suddenly putting a little label on themselves and saying, hey, you know what, I am, and everyone going, yep, we agree. I don't think it's going to be quite that simple. It's going to be open to debate all the way through. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting the way you're saying the first set here, in the way that I've sort of cut it down. I think we can be reasonably clear on sort of the fire for life. I think we understand the mount to bed. I think we understand the treason for blood. I think we understand it. I mean, maybe a little bit of debate on that one. Then the second one are things that are somewhere around the middle of the story. The fire for death, I think we can guess it, but we can't be 100% sure yet. The mount to dread at this stage in the story, don't forget, Drogon's still quite small. She's not ridden him yet, so actually that's still quite a long way away. And the treason for gold, then she hasn't discovered what's going on yet with Jorah, so that's all in the future. So those things are a little bit unsure, and it's the last ones that we are definitely unclear about.
I think the mount to love is actually Jon, though. Like, actually,
you think it's actually Jon? Okay, yeah. I mean, maybe my mind is just way purer than everyone else's, but I've never I've never born into this idea of the mounts being sort of lovers or anything like that. I think that they are pure.
Well, it goes with your theory. It goes with your theory, like that Jon is going to be like a wolf man. Don't you have that theory?
I do, yeah. Well, maybe. So maybe he will. Okay, here's me refining my theory on the go. Maybe he will be walking into Ghost, and then she will ride Ghost somewhere in some kind of incredibly dramatic way. There we go. Love it. So then that way she would be riding him in a very literal way. Okay, let's just go. So I think we've got to the end roughly of the visions. Are there any other things that you think it's worth us covering off in terms of the Undying as a whole, or what the visions might mean for the story going forward? I mean, we've got these visions. It's all very well and good having these visions. There's one point later on when Dany goes, oh yeah, this is a bit like that vision I had. How is this actually going to affect the story going forward, do you think?
I think we see it affect the story because Daenerys questions a lot of things based on these visions. Like, she'll say, there's still two people that will betray me, and I don't want to say it's like Cersei-esque, but it kind of is like Cersei-esque, where Cersei is completely paranoid about the Maggie the Frog prophecy, where it's just manifested into like that's what her life is about, like that her whole life is trying to forestall this prophecy and being obsessed over it. Daenerys isn't like that. It's kind of in the back of her mind, but you don't know like how that will affect her going forward when some of these things start to happen. Like when she does realize, though, this is the betrayal for gold. She thinks it could be Jorah. Then she thinks it could be Brown Ben Plum, but she doesn't know. So she does think about it. She doesn't obsess like Cersei, but it could manifest into that the more and more like these visions and prophecies come true.
Yeah, I think that George R. R. Martin, it's very clear all the way through he's writing this, the truth of a prophecy or a vision is a lot less important than whether people believe it in terms of the action. And if people believe it, that is what drives the action of the story. You were talking about Cersei. The same could be said for Melisandre. Whether she sees the truth in the flames is actually less important than the fact that she believes absolutely that what she sees is truth. And that is what drives what she does, and that is what drives the action of the story as a whole. So when Daenerys starts believing these things, I think probably particularly in connection with what Quaithe has said, and when she starts trying to tie these things together, Quaithe comes out and sort of telling her to beware a whole series of characters, some of which very clearly cross over with what we've seen here. Mm-hmm. When she does that, that I think might start swaying how she relates to characters like Fagon when she meets him, for example, and Varys and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think that's the sort of the moral of this in terms of the story, is that regardless of how true they are, and I think the majority of these seem to be reasonably strong, regardless of how true they are, what actually matters is the extent to which Daenerys takes them seriously. Okay, is there anything else you want to add on the sort of the House of the Undying as a whole, or the role of the Warlocks or anything like that while we're on the subject?
No, I think we covered everything. I think we got it. We covered it.
Awesome. Well, in that case, thank you so much for coming. Why don't you remind people where they can find you on the big wide internet?
Alrighty, so you can go to my channel, Gray Area, on YouTube. Cover all kinds of stuff over there, mainly A Song of Ice and Fire, 90 Day Fiance, if you watch that. Witcher, about to start covering some Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at This Gray Area.
Excellent. And I would highly recommend you do go and check out Gray and all of those places. I'm very intrigued by the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn ideas. This is a series by Tad Williams that is an excellent high fantasy series. George R. R. Martin does borrow some inspiration from it as well. I think it's probably fair to say for A Song of Ice and Fire, that as well as many other books. But please do. I'll put a link down to Gray's channel in the description if you want to go check that out. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. I'm going to make you disappear for just 1 second so I can point at things. If you are at all interested in watching some more videos in this series of secrets, conversations with other content creators about fantastic places in Westeros, there's a link appearing about here in a moment. If you'd like to support this channel, get access to some of the stuff I do just for my patrons, some benefits I produce just for my patrons as well. There's a link appearing somewhere around here. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you again, Gray, for coming on. I think this has been a fantastic discussion. Take care, and I shall see you again next time.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.